All right, I'm going to need to take my customary drink of water here. Okay, give me a second, sorry. All right, so economics. This is going to be a bit of a shorter episode today, but it should be. I'm really excited about it because we're going to introduce an author that is pretty epic. All right, so without further ado, I guess let's jump in. So yeah, as I was saying, I'm really excited for this one because um, after we review the last podcast, remember that was on Aristotle's economics, or critique of Aristotle's economics. We're going to be introducing someone named Louis de Bonald, and this book of like his collected writings is called "The True and Only Wealth of Nations: Essays on Family, Economy, and Society." So yeah, Equus, my friend from university, he recommended this book, and so that is why I know about it. And yeah, I'm really excited to present this to you guys because Bonald is pretty epic. So going back to Aristotle for a second, though, well, more than a second. If you'll remember, we spent a lot of time in the past episode critiquing Aristotle's economics and concluded that there were four main takeaways from this book that should inform how a Catholic society should run. The first of these takeaways was the lack of context in economics due to the removal of philosophical justification. In other words, the formulae that modern economics uses is no good without any philosophical idea as to what should be measured and what ought to be done. So, in other words, garbage in, garbage out. Formulae do not formulae by their nature assume some sort of thing being input and some sort of thing being output, but they don't have any control over what those things are. So without control of that, economics is just going to pin itself to uh, radical radical materialism basically, and say that humans are greedy people, only interested in the accumulation of wealth. So if you input that into your statistics, well, yeah, it's going to, you're going to get something that is going to be the same as your input, and yeah, you're just going to be treading on ethics toes there. So yeah, garbage in, garbage out. The second of these takeaways is that it is not the self-interest of the individual, abstracted from all relationships which ought to underlie economic study of human behavior, but rather the interests of the family considered both in relationship to each other and to the household. Thus, proper economics is neither individualist nor collectivist, but familialist. That's a word I made up. Since every individual by nature is related to at least his parents, and since the family relates to the entirety of society as a discrete part of it. The third of these takeaways is that economics is a part of ethics, which deals with the management of the household, as well as a part of politics, which itself is a part of ethics, which deals with the administration of government. In other words, all theories about the way people ought to act fall under philosophy's jurisdiction and not that of economics. Finally, just as economics is a part of ethics, so is econometrics a part of economics that corresponds to the aspect of economics that is quantifiable. So, in this fourth takeaway, we come full circle back to the first takeaway that argued that context was necessary for the interpretation of statistics. Um, in sum, then, ethics informs the construction of the family, i.e., how each individual ought to behave in the family, and that in turn informs economics, which in turn informs econometrics, or the statistics related to economics. All right, I'm going to take another swig here because I'm absolutely parched. Oof. Not sure if you can hear the background, but my family is part of the choir and preparing to sing something, so that should be them in the other room. Okay, so after we've just gone through Aristotle's economics, now we're gonna do an intro on Louis de Bonald. Just introducing who he was and why we're looking at him next, rather than anyone else. So, who was Louis de Bonald? So, Louis de Bonald was a Catholic counter-revolutionary who wrote strongly against the evils of detaching God from the state. He was born in 1754, the only son of a landowning family from south-central France. His father died when he was 4, and at 11 he was sent to an Oratorian school in Paris. In this school he was trained rigorously in the Augustinian tradition. After joining the army, he came back, married, and had 7 children, 4 of whom survived to adulthood. He left France to go to Germany in 1791, just as the French Revolution was starting, and was there in Germany until 1802 when he was allowed to come back. In 1814, after the restoration of the monarchy in France, de Bonald was able to speak more freely, and in 1815 actually became part of the government in the Chamber of Deputies. Along with Burke and Lemaistre, I think that's how you, Lemaistre, something like that. I'm not French, guys, sorry. De Bonald is recognized as one of the preeminent counter-revolutionaries. We will get into his ideas here at some length, but just to give you an overview of the significance of his philosophy, here are 2 quotes from the introduction to the work. Beginning quote, Bonald was a moralist of the old school, with a moral vision shaped by Tacitus's condemnations of Roman decadence, and he was convinced that the prescriptions of Turgot and Smith, Adam Smith, threatened nothing less than to change the very character of European man. The generous, idealistic, and chivalrous ideal of Christian civilization was, he feared, being replaced by a shrunken, narrow, and selfish vision of man. And another quote, so end quote and beginning quote, with regard to society, group, individual, and state, Bonald's philosophy is the antithesis of the Enlightenment. Yeah, so we're not going to be going over any of his actual books today, or any of the actual chapters. And again, that's my bad for getting this episode out so late. But yeah, in terms of like why we're looking at de Bonald instead of another philosopher. First of all, huge thank you to Equus. He's the one who got me the book, and that's a major reason why we're doing it. But um, yeah, like economics as a discipline, it didn't really exist exactly until like Adam Smith. So or at least in its present form. So to be able to critique that, you would have had to be born after the after Adam Smith in order to refute his ideas of political economy. So this is so instead of like whereas Aristotle was starting from scratch in economics and just sort of like giving a pretty reasonable overview of how society should go, de Bonald here is having to deal with people like who are diametrically opposed to what he's about, and his answers necessarily reflect like the uh, the struggle, the ideas of the time, and what whether those sort of like the culture war, would the revolutionaries win, or like would conservatism win? Those ideas were the battleground that he was fighting in. So he's a little bit more in place. He's in a bit of a better spot to see the evils of economics, sorry, than pretty much any other author. I mean, Lemaistre's up there, Burke, um, but I'm not sure Burke went into. Yeah, I don't know that Burke had like a social theory, and he wasn't Catholic. So Lemaistre was Catholic, de Bonald was Catholic. He was a very staunch Catholic. His one of his sons actually went on to become the Cardinal of Milan for 30 years. And yeah, he just modeled life. Like he lived 48 years with his wife. Um, he, did public service. Yeah, and he is one of the most important voices against the decadence and rational, self-interested model that Adam Smith sort of created, and he goes for the throat on that one. Um, so that's why we're going with Bonald. If we could have gone with like Aquinas, or I'm not sure if Augustine has anything on it, but Bonald is sort of in the trenches, has a better view, and he knows, you know, the ideas that he's talking about are relevant to society, whereas like Saint Thomas wouldn't be able to. I mean, he could refute them. He probably has refuted them, honestly, but he wouldn't, he wouldn't know that they exist. Like he was born, or he lived 600 years before that, and wouldn't really be able to comment on the specific and most important issues on in French politics at the time. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Like, I don't want to make it seem like uh, I don't want to demean St. Thomas Aquinas. I'm just saying, like, you know, it's easier to comment on something that has already happened rather than something that is going to happen in 600 years. Like, kind of a given there. So we'll probably circle back to Aquinas, and I'll search for other works as well. But Dev on all this is gonna be a pretty epic few episodes here as we get into him. So, all right, well, I think that about wraps it up for the economics session. A bit of a shorter one today. Thank you all for tuning in, and God bless.